I didn't plan for my life to change that night. I was just trying to get home. It's January 2003. I'm 34 years old. I've been in New York for 12 years at this point, and I'm at that specific moment where you're starting to accept that the dream you came for might not happen. I'd been auditioning constantly. I'd done some theater, some television, some work that paid the bills but didn't feed anything else. I was tired. I was burned out. I was the kind of tired that comes from years of hope deferred, where your body is running on muscle memory and resentment instead of actual energy. That night I was leaving a workshop. It was a scene study class I'd been taking, one of those things you do as an actor to stay sharp when you're not working. It was held in this basement studio in Hell's Kitchen, fluorescent lights, folded chairs. The particular smell of desperation that all acting studios seem to have. I paid $70 for the workshop, which was $70 I did. Really have, and I had shown up because I was trying to convince myself that I was still serious about this, that I was still doing the work, that I hadn't given up even though I was very much considering it. The class was led by this older man, a teacher who'd been around theater for decades. He was the kind of person who'd probably had his own dreams once and had learned to transfer them into teaching. He wasn't unkind, but he was honest to the point of cruelty sometimes. During the class, I did a scene, and afterward, he gave me notes. The notes were technically sound. They were about my performance, but there was something in his voice when he was giving them this tone of resignation, like he was going through the motions with a student he'd already decided wasn't going to make it. When the class ended, I packed up my stuff slowly. I was in no hurry to leave, to go back to my apartment, to spend another night alone in that place where the walls seemed to be closing in. I was moving through the world like a ghost at that point, going through motions, showing up, not actually present. I took the stairs up from the basement and walked out onto the street. It was cold, genuinely cold. The kind of January cold that makes you feel like the city is punishing you for being alive. I was walking toward the subway, thinking about nothing really. Just the weight of my bag, the coldness of the air, the general heaviness of my own existence. And then I saw him. He was sitting on the steps of the studio building, just sitting there in the cold. He was maybe 22, 23 years old. He had this look of someone who was completely lost. Not geographically lost, physically and emotionally lost. Like he'd woken up in the middle of his own life and didn't recognize it. I didn't stop. I walked past him. I had no reason to stop. I didn't know him. I wasn't a social worker or a therapist or anyone equipped to help anyone. I was barely holding myself together. And I was cold. I was tired. I wanted to get home. But something made me pause. I don't know what it was. Some small voice that wasn't the voice of self-preservation or sense. Some small voice that said, you're about to walk past a person who needs something, and your life is about to pivot on whether you're the kind of person who walks past or the kind of person who stops. I stopped. I walked back, and I sat down next to him on the steps. I didn't say anything. I just sat there in the cold next to this stranger. And after a while, he started talking. He was an actor too. Of course he was. He'd just gotten rejected from a major audition that morning. Not just rejected, humiliated. The casting director had told him he had no talent, that he was wasting everyone's time, that he should stop trying and find something else to do with his life. And he'd spent the entire day sitting in his apartment, spiraling, thinking about whether she was right, whether he should just give up, whether his parents had been right all along when they said this was a stupid dream. He was on the steps of the acting studio trying to decide whether to go inside or go home and never come back. I sat there and I listened. And I told him the truth. I told him that what the casting director had said was a lie wrapped in an opinion. I told him that rejection is just someone else's decision about what they want, not a referendum on whether he should exist as an artist. I told him, and I'm still not sure where this came from. I told him that the only real way to know if you have talent is to keep going long enough that you accumulate evidence. That rejection is just data, not destiny. And then I said something that I needed to hear as much as he did. I said, the people who make it aren't the most talented. They're the ones who show up on the days when they have no reason to believe it's worth showing up. You're here, you showed up. That means something. We sat on those steps for maybe 30 minutes. It was freezing. My hands were numb, but I didn't leave. And by the time he stood up, something in his face had shifted. He wasn't fixed. He wasn't suddenly confident, but he was less broken. He was back in his own body instead of orbiting it from some terrible distance. He thanked me and went back into the studio for the evening session. I never saw him again. I don't even remember his name, but something happened to me in that 30 minutes that changed everything. I realized that I'd been so caught up in my own despair, so focused on my own failure and my own questions about whether I was good enough, that I'd completely forgotten something essential. I wasn't the only person in pain. There were other people out there struggling with the same doubts, the same fears, the same fundamental questions about whether they should keep going. And somehow in the act of helping someone else through that darkness, I'd found my way back to it myself. I walked to the subway and I was different. I don't mean I suddenly had hope. That would be too easy, too neat. But I had something else. I had a reason. I had a sense that my struggle wasn't just personal. It was part of something larger. And if I gave up, I wasn't just giving up on my own life. I was giving up on my responsibility to the people who might need to hear that someone made it through. There's this idea in existential philosophy from a guy named Viktor Frankl. He was a Holocaust survivor, so when he talks about suffering, he's not being metaphorical. He wrote that meaning isn't something you find, it's something you create through how you respond to suffering. He said that even in the worst circumstances, you have the freedom to choose your attitude toward your circumstances. You can't always change what happens to you, but you can always change what you do with what happens to you. I'd been treating my struggle as something happening to me, but in that moment on the steps with that kid, I realized I could choose what I did with it. I could use it. I could let it make me bitter, or I could let it make me compassionate. I could walk past other people's pain, or I could stop and sit with them for 30 minutes in the freezing cold. That choice, that simple choice to stop instead of walk past it, rewired something in me. It gave me a reason to keep going that had nothing to do with my own validation. It made me understand that my career, my struggle, my search for success was actually part of something bigger than myself. It was connected to everyone else out there trying to do something difficult and terrifying. After that night, I approached everything differently. I stopped auditioning like I was desperate and everyone else held my fate in their hands. I started auditioning like I was offering something, like I had something to say. I stopped treating other actors like competition. I started treating them like allies in a shared struggle. I showed up differently to rehearsals because I understood that what I did in a room with other artists mattered beyond just me getting the part. And here's the strange thing, success started to come, not immediately. Not because I suddenly figured out some magic formula, but because I was present in a different way. I was available to the work instead of just focused on the outcome. I was listening to scene partners instead of thinking about my own performance. I was offering something instead of trying to get something. A few months later, I was auditioning for Game of Thrones. I didn't know it would be Game of Thrones at that point. I just knew the character was interesting and the writing was good and I had something I wanted to offer. I walked into that room and I was present. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I wasn't desperately performing gratitude for the opportunity. I was just fully there, fully committed to the work, fully willing to offer what I had. I got the part. But here's what I actually know. I wouldn't have gotten the part if I hadn't stopped on those steps that night. Not because of some cosmic reward system, but because I had to learn that suffering isn't an excuse for selfishness. That struggle is supposed to make you more compassionate, not more defensive. That the only way out of despair is to stop being so focused on your own pain that you can't see anyone else's. That kid on the steps probably doesn't remember me. He might not have even gone on to become an actor, but he gave me something that night without knowing it. He gave me a mirror. He showed me what I looked like from the outside, this person so consumed by his own failure that he couldn't stop to acknowledge another human being's suffering. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. I made a decision in that moment that I've tried to live by ever since. I'm going to be the person who stops. I'm going to be the person who sits with people in their despair. I'm going to be the person who believes in people when they've stopped believing in themselves. I'm going to be the person who understands that my success is not separate from other people's survival. It's connected to it. I'm 56 years old now. I've had a career beyond what I could have imagined that night on the steps. I've had awards and recognition and opportunities that feel surreal sometimes. But the thing I'm most proud of isn't any of those things. It's the decision I made to stop instead of walk past. It's the years I've spent trying to be someone who notices people, who sees them, who reminds them that their struggle is not a referendum on their worth. Because here's the real truth. Your life can change in a moment, not a big moment. Just a moment where you're faced with a choice, the comfortable choice or the courageous choice, the choice to keep going or the choice to stop and help, the choice to believe in yourself or the choice to help someone else believe in themselves. Every single time I've chosen courage over comfort. Every single time I've chosen to stop instead of walk past, my life has gotten bigger. Not bigger in a financial or status way, bigger in a way that matters. Bigger in a way that feels like actual living instead of just surviving. So if you're at a crossroads right now, if you're tired and you're thinking about giving up, if you're convinced that your struggle is just your personal failure and it doesn't connect to anything else, it does, your willingness to keep going isn't just about you. It's about everyone who needs to see that someone made it through. Your decision to be compassionate instead of defensive isn't just about kindness. It's about creating a world where people can admit they need help. One moment, one choice. That's all it takes. Stop instead of walk past. Help instead of protect yourself. Believe in yourself long enough to believe in someone else. That's where everything changes.